welcome to yet another edition of Rugby League Back Chat. It's been a busy old week in the world of rugby league, plenty to get through, and I've got three men to help me do just that. Starting with Martyn Sadler, the editor of League Express, Pete Smith, the rugby league writer for the Evening Post, and in case there are any dodgy comments or dodgy calls, there is one man here to give out red cards and sin bins if necessary, Steve Ganson, the head of match officials at the RFL. Welcome, gents. It has been a busy old week, plenty to discuss, but let's start on the field, because there have been some really interesting results, and I think the obvious one is London Broncos defeating Leeds Rhinos. The Broncos won that game 18-16. Martyn, I'll come to you first. What a result for London Broncos.
Everybody said at the start of the season they'd struggle to win a game. They've now won 3 out of 7. Last Friday night was their first away win of the season. And the way they did it, that was that was the thing that was so striking, because they came back with 2 late tries. Leeds looked to be safe with about 7 or 8 minutes to go in the game. And the Broncos hit them with 2 late scores to, and a conversion at the end to win by 2 points. I think, Peter, you were there. I mean, it must have been an absolute shock for Leeds Rhinos and their supporters.
Yeah, it was. They were 16-8 up with about 6 minutes to go, and then conceded back-to-back tries, which, I mean, it's not acceptable, is it, to be 16-8 up and with 6 minutes to go?
It's pretty exciting, though, when it happens, isn't it?
Great entertainment for the fans. So, well, certainly the away fans, not so much the home fans. Leeds were actually booed off at half-time when they were trailing 8-0. The funny thing is, I thought Leeds played better actually against London than they did the week before against Hull. They didn't offer a great deal in the first half, but for 20 minutes in the second half, when they scored 16 unanswered points, they looked like a good team. I mean, you were there, Matt, you'd probably agree with that, but they just can't seem to sustain it. The defence isn't good enough. The defence was actually a little bit better, but it was a different problem on last week. They couldn't defend kicks. All 3 of London's tries came from kicks, and the last one, the winning try with a couple of minutes to go, Leeds didn't contest the kick, and that's a worrying sign.
So it's just really a weakness near to their own line, is what you're saying, defensively. I think they're struggling to defend. Yeah, well, defend that last 10 metres.
In the previous games against St Helens, when Saints got on top, Leeds played quite well in that game, and against Wakefield and against Hull, big men were running at them. They were dropping off tackles. That wasn't quite the case against London, but they couldn't defend. They couldn't defend kicks, and they look all at sea on last tackle plays. It's no good defending for 5 tackles, is it, if you concede on the last? So worrying signs for them. But the positive is the attack was good. They scored some good tries. And so for 20 minutes, they look like a decent team, but they can't sustain it. They've looked good in patches through most of the games this season, but they haven't got anything like an 80-minute performance.
Do you think they've got any changes they can make that will start getting results? I mean,
that's the tricky thing, isn't there? There's a couple of players to come in. Carl Ablett's not played yet this season. Obviously, he's an experienced player. Dom Crosby not come in yet. He'd had something up front in the middle of the field, I think. But other than that, I think it's getting close to the time where the established players aren't doing it. They've got a very good academy. There's some really talented kids in there. Maybe it's going to get to be the time to bring some of those in. Dave Furner did do that last week. He brought Tom Holroyd in, teenage prop, who was very highly rated. He only got about 10-15 minutes, but he looked pretty much at home. There's Callum McClellan, the young halfback.
Everybody's expecting him to make his debut soon, aren't they?
I just want to
Let's
say,
give him a go.
Leeds have been, poor, and no doubt that's been the case. But let's talk about London, Steve. London Broncos, 3 wins out of 7. Some people are saying they won't even win a game at the start of the season. And now they're 4 points clear of the last 2 Super League champions. They've just been a breath of fresh air, haven't they?
Well, they've done really, really well. I think, like you say, it's very dangerous to assume that someone's not going to win a game, and obviously they've proved a lot of people wrong, Matt. But when you look at it as well, we started the new year with the strapline and new beginnings, etc. One of the things that everybody's in the competition have wanted is results that can't be predicted. And this year, when you have a look at the league table, you've Huddersfield, Wigan and Leeds towards the bottom of the league, and London going up there. It just proves that it adds excitement, it adds discussion like what we're talking about now, and it's really what the game needs, and the team that comes up from the Championship to be able to compete and win games is really what the competition is all about. Absolutely. So massive credit to London, you've got to say, and they've deserved the victories.
Well, I remember writing a piece actually for Rugby League World a couple of months ago saying, that potentially the most important club in Super League is London Broncos. Because if the London team can do really well and can establish itself as a Super League club and therefore hopefully boost its attendances and everything else and gain more coverage in London, that'll do the game more good than anything else because, London Broncos are probably the only team in the competition, I think, that if they did well, they could actually influence the amount of the next TV contract, by getting more people in London watching the game. I think that's quite important.
Pete, a word on Danny Ward, because he's given so many players opportunities from right back when he took the job. The likes of Kieran Dixon, who didn't really have it his own way in Super League first time round. They've got promoted, they've lost some key players, but Jordan Abdul's come in. He's taken his opportunity he wanted as a halfback and was fantastic on Friday night. Luke Yates was an overseas signing no one really knew. Everyone were rolling their eyes thinking, just another average journeyman coming over. Yeah. He's been fantastic for him as well. How much credit does Danny Ward deserve for the job he's done?
He deserves massive credit. Remember when he took over from Annie Henderson, people were saying, that's a huge blow for London and they'll go downhill from here. But they haven't. He's guided them to promotion in his first season. They've got 3 wins in Super League in his second season. And you used the term breath of fresh air, didn't you? He's totally different to any other coach in the competition.
That's what's so attractive about him,
He's a complete character. He's what you see is what you get. He's an ordinary sort of bloke.
Yeah.
But he's great to deal with, and the players obviously respond to him. I mean, I obviously, covering Leeds, have known him for quite a while. And I have to be honest, 14 years ago, if you'd asked me to list the Leeds team from top to bottom, who was likely to go on to be a successful coach, I mean, someone like Kevin Sinfield would be up at the top, maybe Rob Burrow, Dave Ferner, and 17th would have been Danny Ward. And, he would admit that. But he's obviously got something, and it's working, and it's great for him. The thing is, the players are responding.
But there's a message. It's not just a fluke as well. I mean, Danny was involved with the England academy setup. He's done his apprenticeship. He worked with Andrew Henderson for years. David Hughes, the chairman, then give him the support of then taking over the team and putting his own identity on. He got the team promoted, and then I think London did a really good piece in that they stay very, very loyal to the players that have been successful for them. They kept the nucleus of that squad as a reward together and give them the opportunity to go on into Super League and prove themselves, and they are doing. So I think there's a message in that, they didn't go and change everything wholesale. They didn't say, maybe we need a different coach now as we're in Super League. David Hughes and his club have stuck behind the people that have been successful, and I think the results on the field show that they're rewarding the club for that loyalty.
And one of the things that's really quite important about clubs generally is recruitment. The clubs that get recruitment right generally are the clubs that do well. And I've always thought the master in this field is Darryl Powell at Castleford Tigers, who seems to be able to sign players, from fairly obscure backgrounds sometimes and turn them into Super League stars. But Danny Ward, I think, is following in his footsteps in that regard. Jordan Abdul, a lot of people sort of said, Jordan Abdul's not really made the grade at Hull. Is he the right man for London Broncos? Well, he certainly seems to be at the moment, doesn't he?
Yeah, but
and you've mentioned Luke Yates from Newcastle Knights,
There's players like Jordan Abdul. Again, he came through a very, very successful England youth system, who has been, chomping at the bit to get an opportunity and regular on-field game time that perhaps he couldn't get at another club, i.e. Hull. And London have given him the opportunity, and he's proven that so far that he can hold his own and do very, very well given the opportunity. As Pete's just said, there may be people in the Leeds system that can come in and they will take their opportunity. You mentioned McLennan, etc. The time comes, but the people obviously need their opportunities. And then one game really isn't enough, or 2 games for young players. They've got to have a period of time and some confidence. And you'd look at Abdul and say that he's got a bit of that, and he's obviously doing quite well at the moment.
It's worth mentioning with Danny Ward, though, his dad as well. I mean, I don't know whether his dad, David, has any input, but he was a successful coach for a long period at a lot of clubs in a different era. But,
He's very different from his dad. He's very different from his dad, though, is Danny.
Totally different.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's anyone quite like Danny Ward, is there?
But
David was probably a more serious guy,
absolutely. That's the thing about Danny is he's just totally. I don't know if carefree is the right word, but
it gives that impression.
Yeah,
gives the impression he loves what he's doing. And he enjoys every minute of it.
And that's clearly rubbing off on the players, isn't it? I mean, I would think their approach to last week was quite simple. Let's just go and have fun. There's no pressure on us. Let's see what we can do. And it worked. All the pressure was on Leeds, and they couldn't handle it.
And the pressure this weekend is on Hull, because Hull go down to Trailfinder Stadium, and that's a challenge.
It's not an easy place to go. I mean, Castleford did a fantastic job down there to have a big win, but Wakefield, who are a good side, have lost down there. Wigan have lost down there. It's a plastic pitch. It's a tidy little place. I've been there a few times. Enjoy watching rugby there, but the surroundings aren't particularly palatial. And if you go there and you're not on your game, you'll get turned over. The thing is now, though, clubs aren't going to be facing London thinking, it's an easy 2 points.
They know what they're up against.
I would think Hull are going to be really focusing on this week. And I think Huddersfield are down there fairly soon as well.
They play them twice fairly soon. That's really crucial.
If they can pick up another couple of wins, how many points do you need to stay up?
Well, you look at the league table now, Huddersfield, Wigan and Leeds are 4 points behind the rest. The gap is starting to open.
Steve, will there be people... Will there be other teams looking at the league table, looking at London have won 3 games out of 7, and be starting to be concerned at how frequent London are picking up results? Because it's not unfair to say everyone thought London would go down, and they are winning games and are pulling away from some teams. So will there be teams worried about that?
For sure. You're going to go there and there's a journey, obviously. You're going to go down there and be playing on an artificial pitch. So that's different. So, I'm sure that there'll be a few teams that I'll be really looking over the shoulder and hoping that they don't get too far in front. Or it's going to be a right scrap towards the bottom. And then, as we all know, you've got a tough Easter period coming up where teams have got to play over that period 2 games, and that can have a big bearing on the league table then once you get Easter. As Pete mentioned, everybody forgets Brian McDermott started down in London.
Yes.
And did a similar job and ended at Leeds and did, a fantastic job, as everyone knows. So, Danny and Brian, you never know where that leads in the future. They both seem to be doing very
Leeds, I'll
similar
be making
things.
long-term plans too.
Well, possibly, but let's not have him moving on straight away. Well, he's doing a great job at London. He's settled down there. He's a Surrey lad now, where he keeps saying. And let's hope London can hang on to him for he certainly has, but let's hope London can hang on to him for a while.
I think we're back to the beginning.
I would think clubs will, if he keeps doing this, clubs will certainly be looking
back to the beginning. That you want a competition that the team that comes up from the Championship can win games and become a real threat to the other, other teams. And I think the credit to London is absolutely massive. I think it's been great for the competition.
I want to pick up on a point that Steve made a few minutes ago about opportunities for young players. Jordan Abdul was the player you cited, because there has been something in the papers this week in League Express, Lee Greenwood, saying that the RFL are refusing to sanction them playing any reserve grade games because they didn't enter their competition at the start of the year. They wanted to play Halifax, they weren't allowed. And they're very frustrated, basically, because they built a squad together with the view of going to reserve grades next year. Martyn, is it right that we're effectively preventing players from getting game time as Lee wants to get for some of his fringe players?
I think it's absolute madness. Absolute madness. We've got clubs, like Wigan, for example, who have got a squad of 30-odd players, a named squad, all given squad numbers, and yet only 17 can play at any one time. the others, you know, you've got kids at Wigan who have played one game in God knows how many weeks. It's just absolute crazy. Of course, they go on dual registration to clubs like Swinton and so on and so forth, or go on loan to other clubs. But really, you know, that we want to see those players playing for their own clubs and, you know, bursting through the ceiling to play for the first team. I mean, one kid who, for example, I've sort of noticed this season is Harry Smith of Wigan, who's playing for Swinton. And, you know, Harry Smith was absolutely brilliant when he played for the academy against the Australian combined high schools. But, you know, how long is a player like that, for example, going to have to wait before he gets his chance at Wigan? The only opportunities they get are when other players get injured. So, of course, if players don't get injured, they tend not to get those opportunities. And I think that's really unsatisfactory.
Steve, that said, just quickly, if the clubs aren't agreeing to sign up for the RFL competition, then why should the RFL let them play reserve grade when they want?
To be fair, it would be wrong of me to comment on this because everything that's occurred, I'm not furnished on. So it would be unfair for me. I'd be reporting something that I may not be entirely accurate about. So from that point of view, I don't know the background to this particular case.
Thanks, Steve. Well, after a short break, we'll be talking to Steve about what's going on in the world of match officials. Stay right here for the next part of Rugby League Back Chat. Welcome back to Rugby League Back Chat. We're going to turn our matters to officiating because you will know by now that we have Steve Ganson on the panel today. Steve, a lot of change for the match officials this year with the change in the rules and so on and so forth. There's been a lot of talk about it. Will it work? Will it won't work? In your view, how have the rule changes gone so far?
I think they've been tremendous. Been really, really delighted. I think when we set back with Super League and the RFL last July, and we were looking more into ways that we can improve the product. If we'd have been at this stage back then, we would have been very, very happy with where we're at. So I'd say an absolute thumbs up. It's not just been done by the referees, it's been done with a lot of consultation with clubs, players, coaches, who've all bought in very, very well and have all played their part. It's been a game-wide evolution, I've got to say, and everybody's played a great part in it. So thoroughly delighted where we're up to with it.
Guys, for you as spectators, we'll start with you, Pete. How have you found the rules?
Yeah, it's been miles better. Yeah, the players are getting on with it, aren't they? I think that's a good point by Steve. Everybody seems to have taken to it, not just the officials. Obviously, they're policing it, but the players as well and the coaches. I mean, nobody wants to watch 2-hour games on a Thursday night in February. Now we're getting games are kicking off at 7:45 and finishing at 9:30 or so. And that's just much better for everybody. We're getting more, the ball's in play longer, we're getting more of what the fans pay for, and it's a much better spectacle to watch. I think no downside to it as far as I'm concerned.
I just wonder, Steve, whether we ought to apply the shot clock to the video referee decision.
Well, there's always been a discussion around that.
Yeah.
But if you're going to put a clock on something that forces someone to make a decision that's incorrect, then there's always the other side of the debate, Martin, that people say, well, you shouldn't have a timer on it. All we're really bothered about when clubs and livelihoods...
a mischievous question of mine, I think.
It has, it's been put there. People have suggested amount of replays, 2 replays and a decision. Other people have suggested maybe a time gets put on it. Then there's been the captain's challenge. There's been all kinds of things suggested what can happen. But like with all rules or all changes, you've got to look at the direct input, both positive and negative, that they can have on the game going forward.
If I were to be mischievous as well, following on from Martyn, the talk with the video referee is it's there to try and prove the referee's wrong. They've got to conclusively prove that the referee's on-field decision is incorrect.
Yeah.
Surely if after, say, 90 seconds, 60 seconds, they can't prove that, then you're just going to stick with the on-field decision anyway, so a shot clock wouldn't.
And if you look at the timings, that's what's been happening. If you look at this year's video referee, and I'll ask you, you won't think of an incident that's been particularly controversial around the video.
It's not been as intrusive, I think, this year, the video referee. I'd certainly concede on that one.
The referees have been encouraged by myself after, again, consultation with people and the game and broadcasters, etc., that we want the referees on the field to make a decision. We got rid of checking. We got rid of the checking on foul play. We got rid of players lying there feigning injuries and hoping there a penalty being given by the video referee. Video referees only come in on foul play now to recommend either sin bin or dismissal. So there's no benefit in someone lying on the ground. On replays, restarts a play, it's 2 quick looks and then straight to the outcome, go with the on-field decision. Referees are expected to make a live call on the field, the judge then statted on their accurate live call, and the referees are there to only overturn the live call if there's sufficient evidence to overturn it. If not, as you say, go with the pictures, make the decision and get the ball back into play.
That's going back to what the video referee was originally brought in to do, isn't it? Was to basically to cut out clear errors.
Yeah, we want confident referees.
We've gone away from
the referees have got to make decisions on the field. And I know that they don't always please everyone. Someone's got to make them. The video referees have got to make them. And as you alluded to earlier, no one wants to go to 2 hours and 15 minutes of rugby and watching downtime and replay after replay after replay in the ground. Sometimes you just got to go with the man on the field. The decision's there. He's made a live call. Can't be overturned. Insufficient evidence to overturn the call. Stick with the live call and crack on with the game.
The one thing I would like to see, Steve, and going along with the tenor of what you've just said, I still don't like the video referee making calls on obstruction. You know, I would like to see that cut out from the video referee's role. And if the referee on the field doesn't see an obstruction when a try is scored, then let's just assume that there isn't one. Because so often, the video referee, you know, when you slow things down and so on, you see a player perhaps running into or close to another player, it can sort of exaggerate the degree to which obstruction occurred, in my view.
We've been very again, we've been very consistent on that. And that came with a lot of work with clubs and coaches. We work on very, very simple system of obstruction, which is based on collision on the outside shoulder, hitting the defender front on. It's not based on football decisions. The referees are not coaches. They're not players. They rule on rulings. Last year, we had if you remember the Summer Bash, we stripped the video rate back down to where it started, right at the beginning of Super League in conjunction with Sky and Neville Smith, and we took it right back and we took away obstruction, we took away challenges in the air, and we took it just basically stripped it right back to groundings and how it first began. And
I really like that, I've got to say.
We fed it back, and it was fed back of a full discussion. And one of the things people said is, we should go with best practice where best practice allows, because an obstruction or otherwise can cost the team promotion, relegation, finals, etc. And if the video referee's there, then they should use it if needed. But again, my direction to the referees is we want you to make decisions on the field and we want you to rule. We don't want you just using the default as a video, because what you got to remember with these blokes is 1 week they're on TV, and they've got to make that decision, and they've got a video referee. The other week they haven't. So I would often say to them, look, just get on the field and referee in the way. Feel free to referee, knowing that if you do get caught on something, you've got the video, but next week you might not have. So we're encouraging the referees to make decisions and be accountable on the field.
I'd like to see it go back to just just grounding, because you mentioned obstruction. You could say that about a lot of different offences, couldn't you? But the thing is, if there's a clear obstruction, the referee will spot it.
Yeah,
I mean
that's my opinion. Yeah.
I think
there are very few where you see on a televised game where they don't. So let's just go back to grounding. Has he got the ball down? And then I think that'll cut out a lot of interpretation. Leave the referee to deal with
as
things
Pete
like
says,
obstruction.
with matters such as what you're discussing, the game requires a level of maturity. So if we're going to go down avenues such as what you're putting forward here, there's no point in us getting 5 rounds in to a competition and a team loses on an obstruction and everyone's saying, oh, well, maybe we should have checked that, and maybe it's the wrong way not to check it and it's now cost this and that. Or a coach saying, well, that potentially, that decision could cost me my job. What somewhere down the line is, there has to be a level of maturity when you make the decisions. If you're going to take them out the hands of the officials checking, fine, well, we just got to live with the call of the people.
Well, the maturity is we've got to accept referees' decisions.
Exactly.
While knowing that sometimes, occasionally, they will get them wrong. Nobody's perfect, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think Steve ever made a wrong call, did you?
Yeah, I did. And
one or two famous ones.
yeah, I did, and that's the thing of it. And again, it's like you've got to come back from errors, and the referees will make errors, and they work very hard. They don't make the errors deliberately. They're put under massive amounts of scrutiny, not just by the game, by us.
Yeah.
By the management of the referees, put them under a tremendous amount of scrutiny and accountability for the decisions that they make on the field. And they work tremendously hard. And what I can say is that there is nobody more disappointed than the referees themselves when they get something wrong. I know that's very difficult to put out there, but it is factual. And we do hold them to account.
Is there ever a temptation to allow the referees to speak publicly about decisions that have been made? I know a couple of years back there was a Twitter account where they answered questions and that stopped happening. I've got to say, if I'm ever not quite sure on why a decision's been made, I often will message one of them and they give me a brilliant explanation and my understanding of the game has grown from their help. Yeah. Is there ever that temptation to allow them to speak publicly on decisions like that?
I think it's difficult because not every individual is the same. And I know some people that would take that within their stride. Yeah. But we've got to also look at the fact that we've got to put them out on a game next week and we've got to keep the confidence high, and that's why there's a management system, i.e. myself, to kind of be a barrier towards some of that. And as you say, the referees will gladly and often do, we're happy to speak. I think just when you come off a field and there is something controversial, to compound it. Because very, very often people know they've got videos, laptops, they can rewind things that someone's right or wrong. To wheel a chap out who's just done a really, really tough game just to really put him there to admit he's got something wrong is not the best thing to get performances from them and also to look after them mentally to be in a good place. So, however, I don't believe in not having the referees come to things like we're doing today, or to go to clubs, or to work with players, or to spend time in and around. I'm all in favour of that. Just putting them straight up there after a match, I think would be a lot to ask.
I noticed in Australia, Steve, I'm sure you've noticed it, Graham Annesley is now, now they've kicked off there, is doing a 45-minute sort of session on a Monday afternoon, Australian time, just reviewing the games in the NRL and picking out any obvious areas of controversy and so on to sort of explain, what happened and whether it or not it was, the right decision and so on and so forth. Just talking about the game generally. I just wonder whether there's scope for that, for someone like you for that.
Did you watch that yesterday? I watched Graham.
I've not watched it all, unfortunately. I watched this.
I watched Graham, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to revisit that with you in about 12 weeks. Yeah. Because I think Graham did a tremendous job yesterday, and I'm kind of putting myself back to round 1 this year. We started with Wigan playing St Helens, Warrington playing Leeds, Hull playing OKR. And round 1, you can often go in and be very, very upbeat and things happen. But like with everything like that, you're always in a position where it's not going to go great on every game, every single week. And it's where it changes to. Does it just change after a couple of weeks of nothing but negative that doesn't really do the sport much good in the long run? I thought Graham did tremendous, by the way. I thought he did a great job. But bear in mind, Graham is not the referee's boss.
No.
He's head of football. So he's commenting on a lot of other matters, not just decisions. Bernard Sutton's head of refereeing. So I think it's good maybe to have someone that overviews the all of the football policy, and refereeing is a section to it if there's something particularly interesting or controversial that he covers as the boss of that department. The actual referee's boss just going up there week in, week out, talking about every individual game, I'm not quite sure that's the direction we need to go to. But in 10 or 12 weeks, when Graham's on about round 10 in the NRL, I'll be really interested to see the direction it gets taken in.
Steve, I think one thing people watching would probably like to know is how do you allocate, and do you do it, who does it, how do you allocate referees to particular games? There's certainly a perception that certain referees or certain clubs have certain referees more often than others. Is it random? Is there a process?
No, I allocate the games. All the referees' rosters are taken into account. We try to have a spread of matches. However, what you've got to rely on, again, this was part of a consistency process. We only use a narrow panel of video referees. That was put forward that the game felt that was a particular specialist role. And to get an element of consistency, it was important to use the same video referees on a more regular basis because they get used to the pressure, camera angles, what they can and can't get, increase the speed of decision, etc. So what that means is that if you look at the games, for example, we'll take this week, Thursday night, Wakefield play. Now, the referee who referees a Wakefield game, Friday morning then has to fly to Catalan to be the video referee on the Catalan game, which then takes him out of Sunday appointments, naturally. Yeah. Another referee, you may take, say, Chris Kendall, for example. He may referee a Thursday night game, but he also backs up as a touch judge because that's his secondary specialist role. So some of my referees have a secondary role as a video referee, and some have a secondary role as a touch judge. So we operate that system.
So which are the guys who do video refereeing then?
The guys that do the video refereeing are Chris Kendall, Robert Hicks and Ben Thaler.
Right.
Now, they're the three regular ones that we use occasionally when there's magic weekends or there's extra games put on TV. We may have to bring someone in from the squad just to cover the allocation of numbers, etc. But what we do is look at the games. Obviously, we know the major, what are classed as major fixtures as well. I'm also looking at development of officials also. I'm looking at which teams they've had in the weeks leading up recently. Of course, sometimes there's issues on games. For example, if there was a disciplinary matter, I wouldn't use the same referee who may be involved in a disciplinary matter involving a player with that team again on the following week. So there's lots of things goes into the allocation.
So the various reasons why it can't be random.
Martyn, well,
can't be random.
Hold that thought because we've got to have a quick break. We will let Steve have a little bit of a rest before putting him to task once again right here on Rugby League Back Chat. Welcome back to the final part of this week's Rugby League Back Chat. Before the break, we were talking to Steve about refereeing matters. Steve, just a few more questions. I don't want to keep talking about this, but one thing that has been in the news is about the two referee system. The job was advertised. It's now disappeared and doesn't seem to have been filled by anyone. What is the latest with the move to get to two referees, and how about Matt Chechin, because he was widely assumed to be getting that job?
It's not a no. It's under review. The clubs, the Super League clubs, I'd like, and rightly so, more information around it. They want to consider it further for the benefits of our competition, and that's the point that we're up to at the moment. It's not a no. It's under consideration. However, Matt Chechin had finished his position with the NRL. We tried extensively to bringing him over to the UK, but due to the UK immigration, there's no government-based endorsement for match officials in the UK. They're not classed as sports people, so we had to have a technical role for him to do, which would have been around the introduction of the two referee system. Due to that being placed on hold at the moment, or needing further evidence, etc., now wasn't the right time to do that. And Matt has took up another contract with the NRL.
I think we read, didn't we, that it was going to cost £325,000 to introduce the two referee system. And I've got to say, the Rugby League isn't flush with money at the moment, and I would have thought that there were better, if you've got £325,000 in a drawer somewhere at Red Hall, there are better ways to spend it, I would have thought, Steve, because I don't see that, you look at what's happening in Australia, and there are quite a lot of Australian people who say they'd prefer to revert to one referee there. And I think the evidence seems to be that they're making one referee very much the boss on the field now, that, the original idea of two referees having equal responsibility seems to have fallen by the wayside. So surely, if we're going to spend that sort of money, what we need to do more effectively is promote and market rugby league rather than try and referee it ever more perfectly.
Well, just to cover that, Martin, the Super League would have a major input into the financial.
Yeah, but even that, I mean, they're not all.
So it's not about the money being placed there just to be spent. It would take a fair amount of consolidation and discussion, and Super League would have a huge part to play in that. However, as you say, there are people that feel that the one referee system serves the game better, and there are people who absolutely swear by the two referee system. Hence the point that if the game is going to make a decision, which is a huge decision, to take up the mantle of two referees, then the people who run the game and the clubs need to be convinced it's for the betterment of the competition.
Which would be your preference?
Hence the reason. I don't have a preference other than what we do is we do the very, very best for the referees on the field to make the very, very best decisions. Now, the job is, if I've got one referee to work with, then our remit is to do that with what we have. If we have two referees to work with, we'll do that. However, my experience is around a one referee system, obviously, because that's all I've refereed in the UK, etc. And internationally, that's where my experience lies. So for us, if we went to a two referee system, we'd embrace it and we'd make the very best of it. At the moment, I only know the best of a one referee system, but we spent a considerable amount of time working with the NRL, looking at what they consider the perceived benefits of having two referees are, which they say is obviously a cleaner ruck, a better 10 metres, a more accurate 10 metres, and an extra pair of eyes on the field. Now, as Martin said, it depends who you want to speak to as to the judgment of how successful that system is. And I think it's right that what the clubs want to do is not just to jump into something immediately until they're well informed, they can make a decision to go for it or otherwise. And whichever we at the RFL around the referees department will support.
I think one thing we should be aiming for is a standardised set of rules between both major competitions, really. When we have internationals at
and we've
the
got
end of
that
the
now.
year,
That's fabulous. I mean, we've done that. We got rid of the straddle. When I first got the job, where a player used to just put his foot outside the dead ball line, we got rid of that. We went to a tap on the 40-20 instead of the scrum. We've now got the 0 tackle from the 20-metre restart. In fact, shot clocks. This year, when we played the World Club Championship, when Wigan plays Sydney Roosters, it is genuinely the first time I've ever had a meeting with the club, as Pete alludes to here, where the rules are not massively different. We did so well last year in the World Cup final, or Wayne Bennett will tell you, in Australia, partially because our players have been playing under the same set of guidelines. If you watch the NRL now, we are no difference in terms of the general rules of the game.
Talking about the NRL,
we've got to a good place.
I don't know whether we all saw John Bateman's
I was going to bring
debut
this up
for Gold Coast, for Canberra at the Gold Coast at the weekend, but I thought he was fantastic and did great credit to Super League.
Yeah, Pete, what did you think of John Bateman?
Why should anybody be shocked by that? We've seen him tearing it up in Super League for
Absolutely.
I'm not sure how many years since his debut. The perception, obviously from the Australian point of view, is that players over here aren't any good. But they go over there and increasingly they're going and they're becoming some of the best players in the competition.
More successful going there than some of the Australians coming here.
Well, exactly. I don't think it was a surprise to anybody.
No.
Certainly Wigan fans won't have been shocked to see people saying, "Oh, where's this kid come from? You know, he's a world-class talent." We know that.
It certainly wasn't a shock for Canberra. Because they put, to be fair, Peter Mulholland in their recruitment, they put the stall out for John Bateman a long time ago. So they knew exactly what they were getting with John Bateman. Make no mistake about it. And I reckon that potentially they did their homework. So
there's going to be all English players soon at Canberra.
George Williams is the top. How good would it be for the English game if Canberra could win the NRL this year, Martin?
Well, it may a bit of a fantasy, I think, but you never know. The big test for them is this weekend. They're playing Melbourne at home, and Melbourne were absolutely magnificent last Thursday in their opening game against Brisbane. I thought they looked really smart right from the off. So if Canberra could beat Melbourne, then that really would be a massive statement.
It's a double-edged sword, though, isn't it? It's great to see British lads going over there and doing really well, but better players are going to Australia than are coming from the NRL at the moment. And is that a good thing for?
Well, the thing that frustrates me a bit, Pete, is that we seem to be we've got a marquee player rule now, where two clubs can have where a club can have two marquee players, and yet most of those seem to be players who played in the NRL. And we're not giving marquee status to British players. Now, for example, John Bateman, if ever there's a definition of a marquee player, it's him. And, I'd love to see him, back in Super League at some stage, but earning the sort of money that he deserves to earn for being as good as he is. And, I always hoped when it was first introduced that the marquee player rule would only apply to British players or to European players. So that we try and keep our best players in our own competition.
Talking of marquee players, one's been in the news for wrong reasons this week, Tom Johnson.
Yeah.
Gosh, what a shame for him. I think he's the most exciting finisher in the game. He's the sort of player that when he gets the ball, you sit up, you think, what's going to happen here? And he's done his ACL for the second time in 2 years. I think that's.
But you look at Tom Johnson, and you'd say that Tom on one flank and probably Tommy Makinson on the other are as good a finishes as you're going to find in any competition.
Absolutely.
Both here and in the NRL. So it's huge.
He's extraordinarily unlucky, isn't he? But following in the footsteps of Ben Curry, I suppose, in that sense. It's great to see him back now on the field and playing well for Warrington. But I certainly think Tom Johnson is, as you say, probably the most exciting player in the game at the moment, or has been. And also a very sensible young man. I thought the way he handled that question from Bill Arthur on Sky, a few people were upset that Bill asked him about moving to a potentially bigger club, but I thought he handled it brilliantly, handled himself well, and, really did well for Wakefield Trinity. And, you know, great kid.
The fact that obviously he's out of action now for the rest of this season, but the fact that Wakefield have been able to keep somebody like that on a long-term contract shows the progress they're making, doesn't it? I mean, a few years ago, they would have sold Tom Johnson and cashed the cheque like they did with people like Kyle Amor, Gareth Ellis to Leeds, people like that.
Well, look at the work
Michael
Carter's done with Wakefield and Chris Chester and that team that they've got on the field. But we're back to the same point again, is you look at the quality of the competition. Everybody wanted teams to be able to beat each other on any given day. And the players that Wakefield have got in Tupu, Ben Jones, Bishop, Fafita, the halfbacks, they've a great side. But that's what the game we really, you know, need to be saying.
It comes back to what I said earlier about recruitment being so important, you know, and Wakefield have shown it. A smaller budget probably than most clubs, but it makes you focus on getting the right, bringing the right talent in. And they've done a remarkable job in doing that, I think.
Two other clubs that want to be competing for Super League glory at some point in the future, they don't even exist yet, but New York and a mysterious Canadian team that's been run by Eric Perez. The RFL confirmed on Monday that they were accepted, that they could have some potential in the competition. They were going to be able to present to clubs and then they gauge their support. Steve, I'm sure the referees are excited that there's a potential of a trip to New York every other week to go and do the job. What's your take on potentially more overseas or North American teams coming into the competition?
Well, again, you look at what Toronto have brought in terms of exposure to the competition. You know, I'm very much on that. We've got to take the game to the places that want our sport, and you know, and I think it's a brave decision to make, and certainly very interesting for rugby league. So, you know, I don't know all the ins and outs of any bids, and even some of the identity of the people. As I've said, I do the referees department, but I'm sure that the lads will be keen to have a trip to New York and see rugby league and wherever else it is. So for me personally, game going far and wide can only be good.
So will you be sending your top referees out to New York, Steve?
Oh, I'm sure I'll get mine.
Steve will be coming out of retirement.
Yeah. we never used to go to places like that when I was refereeing. Put it that way.
Pete, what's your take on potentially more? Because there are some people that are sceptical. Let's put it that way.
I think it's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, if we could have a successful club in New York, it would be good for the game. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But can we have a successful club there? If we're going to do it, we have to make sure it's going to be a success rather than just jumping into it. I don't know if it's maybe a little bit too early for another team across the Atlantic. It'll depend on the people involved and the plan that they've put together. But potentially, obviously, it's an exciting development. I mean, it's people in the game are maybe going to have to rethink the way fans approach things. I mean, obviously, a New York club's not going to be bringing a huge amount of away fans. We've already got a Canadian team and a French team. It's going to change the culture of the game. I think if we're going to do it, we'll have to do it right.
What's quite interesting, Pete, is that there is the very real prospect at some point in the not too distant future of a Super League that's got Catalans in it, Toulouse in it, and Toronto in it. You know, so if we actually got to that point and we had a 12-team Super League, but with 3 overseas clubs, that would be an interesting dilemma, wouldn't it, for the game? Because, you know, as you say, those 3 clubs, none of them would bring enormous away support. And, you know, it might potentially, you know, it's difficult to know what the impact would be on the next TV contract.
Martyn, I guess the other concern as well that needs to be considered is the Championship and League One clubs, the cost and the time it requires on them, players having to take time off to get over there.
Sure.
Is that a concern that 2 are coming in at once potentially?
Well, we'll have to see whether 2 come in or even 1 comes in because, you know, we've not had a decision on any of them yet. But, you know, that's part of the problem of expanding the game, isn't it? And I think most players, most clubs have managed to take a reasonable squad over to Toronto so far. As far as I'm aware, I've not kept a.
I think one or two have
struggled.
Had problems.
Yeah.
I mean, there's issues with visas.
There are going to be issues like that, aren't there? But for getting into the United States, it's not easy, as they've tightened up a lot. So it will be a challenge for the game as a whole. And you know, the RFL, it's one that the RFL needs to study very carefully. But the rewards of expansion, I think, are great, and so hopefully we can find a way to do it properly.
Well, gentlemen, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for this week. Don't forget, you can get all the information for everything that's happening on this channel by simply going to www.freesports.tv. That's all we've got time for this week. A big thanks to my guests Martyn, Steve and Pete for their contributions. We'll be back next week for another edition of Rugby League Back Chat. Bye for now.